Good morning, everybody. So good to see you all here. With a day like this, I wondered how many people I'd be speaking to. And so many. So happy to see you. And I know that people are watching from home too. So I'm going to try to remember to look up at that camera once in a while, so to acknowledge you all here. And I'm happy to have the children. That sound does not bother me at all. Hooray to you courageous mothers for bringing your children with you. They're beautiful. So I am, if you don't know me, I've been a member of this church for about 20 years now. And from sitting in the pews with tissues, healing and healing and healing, to stepping into participation and leadership, and then going off to seminary, a church, and then coming back to be just a member again, and now guest speaker. So, wow. I've evolved right in front of this group, and you are too. We all are. And evolving is a huge word for us to realize that's what we're doing on our spiritual journey. I want to give you I'll be talking about the book that I just published, my very first book. Thank you very much. And I want to give you a little background about it. It's called Evolution in the Bible, an integral overview of the Hebrew Scriptures. Joy said she bought it and is reading it and is fascinated that Unity is using this. And I have to say, it's not spiral dynamics. The model that I use is not a Unity teaching. It's from outside of Unity, but I learned it at Unity Institute. And some of us teachers, ministers, are using it and others are not. So it's not an official Unity teaching, but oh boy, I am certain that if Charles Fillmore knew this model, he would embrace it fully, because he talked about evolution as our spiritual journey. In fact, I put a couple quotes in here from him. He says in Mysteries of Genesis, in his evolution, man has apparently always moved in cycles, but each time he comes again to his starting place, he seems to be a little in advance of his former state. So we're moving in cycles, but we always seem to be a little more wise as we come back and around. And he also talked about it in Talks on Truth. Talks on Truth is a collection of sermons that he did. Charles Fillmore did. He's the co-founder of Unity. He said, and remember, Charles used the word he and man as a generic for humankind because that's the era he lived in. He who studies mind may know how to discern the signs of the times. He becomes familiar with certain underlying principles, and he recognizes them in their different masks in the whirligig of time. Under the veil of historic symbology, the scriptures portray the movements of mind, capital M, divine mind. The scriptures portray the movements of mind in its different cycles of progress. These cycles repeat themselves over and over again, but each time on a higher plane. Thus, the sphere or circle is a type of the complete mind, but in manifestation, the circles are piled on top of each other in an infinite spiral. So, spiral dynamics was developed by a sociology professor in the 1960s, way after Charles had this vision of a whirligig of spiral movement of evolution. So I am absolutely convinced he would have loved the spiral dynamics model. And I saw it also in Emily Cady that she understood the evolution of consciousness and how with each, I get a little distracted, but I'm still giving them a blessing every time I hear. With each expansion, with each stage that we grow through, it's a more expansive worldview. So what I want to do with you today is, since I spent 4 years writing this, why should I paraphrase my own book? I might as well give you the first few pages and give you an idea of what I worked on. I learned this from my professor, E.J. Niles, who is now in her 90s, who wanted to write this book, but just couldn't quite pull it together. And 4 years ago, she called me and asked if I would help her write it. And it eventually became just my baby. And she just pushed it out across the table, figuratively on the Zoom screen, and said, "It's yours." So I attribute my learnings to her. And after she left Unity Institute, the ball kind of got dropped. And it's not an official teaching of Unity at all. But because of people like me and others who went through her program, we're keeping it alive. And hopefully, my hope, hold this hope with me, is that this book will become the textbook for Unity's overview of the Hebrew Scriptures. So I want to just read a little bit of the beginning of chapter 1 for you. It's a good day to sit back and be read to anyway, you know? Like if you're at home and you're nice and cozy under your blanket, just sit back and listen. Which God of the Bible? Since the beginning of our awareness, humans have intuitively sensed that an invisible power and presence was the first cause of all things. The Bible's very first verse begins with that assumption. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, from Genesis 1. And from Genesis 2, in the day that Yahweh created the earth and the heavens. So there's the assumption right there. Humankind has always said some higher power must have created this stuff. Acknowledgement of this invisible presence and power provides meaning to our life. It offers a sense of belonging and security, and it offers us a reason to accept what is. God is an absolute to most of us. But our understanding of God continually evolves. As we grow our awareness of our world and our place in it, we gradually and profoundly adjust our understanding of God. And vice versa. As we clarify our understanding of the divine, we clarify our understanding of ourselves. Before humankind developed logic and reasoning, we attributed things that we didn't understand to this mystical entity. We engaged our creative imagination and intuition to visualize this power and presence, the great mystery of our spiritual source. As we developed through the levels described by the model spiral dynamics, our intellect matured and our worldview expanded and became more complex, and so did our perception of God. Our perception of God is affected by our culture and in the era in which we live. Most of the time, in multiple cultures, this God, but by whatever name or image we use, is the only God that is legitimate. We will argue and fight and even die over these beliefs about this mysterious power and presence. So, which God of the Bible do people believe in? Do you believe that in the one that champions magic? Or is it the one that wins your wars? Or maybe it's the God who loves justice. Or perhaps you can only accept a God that is principle and mind. Whichever one it is, do you tend to insist that you have the right idea of God and everyone else is misled? In the 1890s, at the onset of the Unity movement, Dr. H. Emily Cady wrote a series of articles for Charles and Myrtle Fillmore that they published in the Modern Thought magazine. And this series was published as a book called Lessons in Truth, which became the primary textbook of Unity School of Practical Christianity. And in her lesson, Unity of the Spirit, Emily attempts to explain how people have different perceptions of what she calls the stupendous whole. And I go on to explain Emily's story. She says that and I've told this story before. I remember standing on the stage to tell it, but it's a great little story. She says, imagine there's a whole bunch of people standing at a big wall, and they're trying to see past it, what's on the other side, and they have little holes to see through the wall. And this guy over here has a hole about this big, and he says, Oh, I see what's on the other side. There's fields and trees. And this guy has a bigger hole. And he says, oh, there's fields and trees and houses. I see the world properly. And this guy has a much bigger hole. And he says, oh, there's fields and trees and houses and rivers and cows and sheep and sky and clouds. And each one of them is correct. But they can only see what they can see based on the aperture of the hole, the size of the hole. And Emily says, the point is, she says, the next one, oh, you're all wrong. I alone see the whole world. I see all of these things. So every one of them thinks they are right and the others are wrong. What we will observe in this study is that each stage of the evolutionary model has a wider aperture to see the world. They cite, we have blinders based on our experience and our egoic understanding. And we cite religious texts and dogma to defend ourselves. So I ask you, which God of the Bible do you believe in? In a 2018 Pew Foundation survey, about half of the U.S. population said they believe in a God that's in the Bible. Did you hear that? In 2018, about half of the U.S. population said they believe in the God of the Bible. But I want to ask you, which God of the Bible do you believe in? In the survey, people describe this God as a powerful, knowing, benevolent, active deity that loves all people regardless of their faults and protects them. This perception of God is supported by carefully selected passages from the Bible and ignores the passages that describe God as fickle, narcissistic, and jealous. We read the Bible selectively and with different lenses and blinders, depending on what we want to believe or what we want to learn or what we want to argue. Many modern thinkers have thought subconsciously or consciously, I reject the Bible. But no matter how much we resist or ignore it, none of us can ban it from affecting us. The Bible's influence is at the foundation of the Western civilization. So even if you have decided to put it on the shelf and never open it again, you are still, even subconsciously, affected by the Bible's teachings. The Bible has shaped centuries of public policy, church governance, ethics, race and gender issues, literature, movies, music, customs, and taboos. As I said all those, did you flash into one example after another? Yeah. Even as the U.S. population is increasingly less religious, this book continues to inform the collective consciousness in a subtle and profound ways. Not this book, but the Bible. So what the Christians call the Old Testament and the Jewish people called the Hebrew Bible, that's what I'm talking about in this, not so much the Christian text, because that's another whole treatment. I thought about adding that to this book. I thought, no, I just got to get this out. In this study, we will observe the collected writings of the Bible and chronicle a dynamically evolving understanding of the divine, illustrating that humankind's perception of the divine keeps changing and expanding. This is not to say that God has changed. How we perceive the divine naturally evolves as we move through our developmental stages. Our perception of God is a direct correlation with the perception and understanding of our world. Spiral dynamics uses developmental stages kind of like what we use with children. And, you'll think about the baby in a very survival place. And then the next stage, the toddler who is focused completely on the nuclear family, as illustrated with this coupling that's happening that we see here. They might wander away, and then they'll come back for, okay, I still belong to mommy, you know? And at this little 2-3-year-old stage, we've got a lot of magical thinking. We've got I don't know any science. I'm not logical. I'm just very emotional and mystical. And they seem to still be able to see on the other side of the veil. I remember when one of my grandsons were about that age, we were playing with paper masks that we had cut out and colored of the wolves and the pigs, the one wolf and 3 pigs. And it was only 2 of us, so he was a pig and I was a wolf. And I was down on my hands and knees and I started being a mean wolf. And he forgot that I was Oma. And he, terrified, screamed and ran behind the chair. Because at that stage, the logic isn't really developed. It's not that he can't, it's not that he won't, he can't do logical processing at that age. The brain isn't developed enough. That what they see is what they believe it is. So Oma had turned into a wolf, and I had to quickly take the mask off and remind him, and he came right back into my arms. You know, so there's that magical stage. We love that stage with our kids. And in fact, if they stayed in that baby stage, we'd wonder what was wrong with them developmentally, right? So this is the stage of loving, magical, and then they get to the stage of, I can do it on my own. And pretty soon, they're in 1st grade, and they are like totally focused on the kids in school rather than mom back at home. And so they develop and develop and develop, and then we go from that grade school period of cooperating and wanting to please the teacher and getting all the good grades and being accomplished into independence again as the teenager and into adulthood. We vacillate between clinging to the community and stepping out on our own. And that's how the spiral teaches. Back and forth, we kind of go through those stages. The interesting thing is when we take another model, which has got a big name, the documentary hypothesis. That is what Bible scholars have developed to determine who wrote the Bible and when they wrote it. There's different writers from like 900 BCE, and then there's a bunch of writers from 500, 400 BCE, and then there's writers from 200 BCE, all in one book. So if we pull that apart, tease that apart, and see who wrote what, and notice when they wrote it, we're actually going to see an evolution of our perception of God throughout those 800 years of time. And when we see that, then we layer the spiral over it and we say, oh, those early ones were and the spiral uses colors for stages. So, those early ones were in that magical stage of purple. And then the next stage, those writers were in the red warrior stage. And then the next, those writers were in the blue community stage. And each one of them saw God differently. Okay? Everybody's smiling. If you're over there on the camera, you can't see. But the children are just so beautiful. They're just quietly wandering around and giving their love to everybody. So beautiful. So the stages. When we have a really early writer talking about the magic of Moses, throwing down his staff and making the water pure enough to drink. Wow, God made all kinds of miracles happen back then. And then we have another writer, and there's more magic. There's like when they were wandering through the wilderness, they were guided by this pillar of fire and a pillar of light. Have you ever seen a pillar of fire and a pillar of light or a pillar of clouds? Not exactly. But somehow, this is what the writer wrote, and that happened, if it happened, generations before the writer wrote it. So it's part of their mythology, it's part of their story, and that reflects their perception of God. God is very up close and personal, imminent, and possessive. I will take care of you if you have a covenant with me. And then we get into the whole myth about them conquering Canaan. And they go in, and this is the part where most of us say, "Oh, I don't want anything to do with the Bible," right? Because they'll slay the whole town, and they'll deceive without any guilt or remorse. I mean, if you want the gory details, I'm not going to say them here. But go find them. Find out about the story of Dinah and the sister of all the 12 brothers of sons of Jacob, and the revenge that they took on the people as a way of, God told us to do this. And that's why progressives like us say, how can we accept this Bible? Because we love gentleness and reconciliation and acceptance and tolerance. But those people didn't have any of those values. So as we evolve through our stages, we develop different values. And we are motivated to do things by those values. And we project what God is based on what we value. Okay? So God hasn't changed, but we sure have evolved our gods over the years, right? We have different lenses. Unity does not teach an evolutionary lens. Unity teaches a metaphysical lens. And it's, taking each book, each verse, and reinterpreting them to reflect our personal spiritual development. Frankly, I never bought into that much, I'm sorry to say. And it takes a lot of courage as a unity minister to say, I didn't buy into metaphysical interp. I buy into this. This works for me, so it might work for you, and I invite you to play with that with us. So this is kind of a new way of looking at the Bible based on when it was written, because when it was written is huge. In the middle of the time that the Bible was written, a huge shift occurred. It's called the Axial Age. You might have read it with Karen Armstrong or heard about it in other ways. She does a fabulous job talking about this. The evolution of religion, how religion was birthed around in the Hebrew culture around 500 BCE. Before that, a whole different worldview was happening for 10,000 years. So for 8 or 10,000 years, it was the warrior stage. It was how football players on both sides, both teams, will pray that God will give them the victory. That's the warrior stage of believing in God. And so take that into real life when the entire globe was warrior. It's the red stage in spiral dynamics, a good color for that warrior stage. Blood, red, anger, violence. Bring around the rosy. And if you can imagine the whole globe, wherever it was populated, it was populated all around the globe by then, that everyone was in the warrior stage. An attitude of life is a jungle and I've got to kill to survive. I've got to defend me and my family. Kind of like a mafia kind of attitude. And that was all over the globe until the Axial Age dawned, and now we have Hammurabi and the Ten Commandments calling people to conform, to care for others, to what is the beautiful verse of Micah that says, what does God want of you but to be humble and walk humbly with your God, to be gentle, to love justice and walk humbly with your God. That is such a call to reform compared to what the whole globe had been doing before. To walk humbly with your God instead of being this warrior kind of person. So it's a huge shift in the axial age, into this new place where now rules, dogma, doctrine, the written word being sacred, and conformity and self-sacrifice are the values. And that's where, excuse me, that's where our religions were born. And sometimes, I think as you read this, you'll start to understand why you sometimes feel that you are done with the religion that you learned in your childhood. Because you have evolved into a different worldview from that, what I just described. And yet your religion hasn't. And so that's why a lot of us come to unity, because the unity says, no more dogma, no more catechism, no more self-sacrifice for the good of the whole, no more authoritarian figures telling us what to do. That's the whole stage that the Bible was written in, and we've progressed beyond that. Some of us have not even progressed, because that's a valid stage. We've evolved into a different way of seeing it. So I want you to, I'm kind of glad that the children are giving us this very relaxed state here, because I wanted to do something, I'm going to do something with you that is unusual for this center, and they're creating such a great experience for us to just do that. When did God become the fun God? When you stop trying to prove what God is and just stay in the flex and the flow of beingness. I want you to talk to a neighbor, somebody, one or two other people. Make a triangle or make a pair, and answer this. Talk to each other about, this is in the back of the first chapter. How was the Bible presented to you as a child? Do you still hold those views? How do you see the scriptures now? And you can also reflect, was there a period of time when you studied the Bible intensely and then put it on the shelf? Why? Can you say, why did you do that? And are you open to seeing it with different eyes now? So go ahead and talk. I'm going to give you about 8 minutes, and then that'll be the end of our sermon.
What's under there? It's a piano. Red.
How many? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Piano. Well, we don't touch the wires. Thank you for participating so nicely. And I wish I had remembered to suggest to the Facebook viewers to use the chat to have that same discussion. I'll bet you did do that. So I am offering a time for us to talk about this some more after a break this afternoon for a workshop, and you'll have a chance to purchase my book if you'd like. I want to just tell you that also in this book is a final chapter. Even if you're not all that interested in the Hebrew scriptures, there's a final chapter and an appendix that are worth the purchase, because the appendix has a complete written as extensive as I think is necessary for a written description of all the nuances of the model of spiral dynamics. That's hard to find. The original spiral dynamics book written by Don Beck, who developed the model, is kind of like is really complex. It's hard for a beginner to absorb. So I was hoping that this would serve that. And the last chapter is really your integral thinking about the Bible. And I wanted to show you what I've done with that section. Now there's spread eagle on the floor, if in case you... Maybe I won't do this anymore reading. As we evolve our perception of God, we might have different perceptions of ourselves as well, or the other way around. As we evolve our perception of ourselves, we project those ideas onto God. And what in the first stage that we were thinking is the purple stage, tribal stage, and we might say that God is invisible spirits, and I am in fear and awe of them. That would be the very first stage. The next stage read, God is a warrior, and I am his loyal soldier. Or God is a fickle manipulator. Think about Tower of Babel. And I am at the mercy of his whims. You know the Tower of Babel? God said, let's just destroy this tower so that we disperse all the people, lest they become as powerful as we are. What a jealous God. That's what they believed God was. In the blue meme, the next one, you might say, God is in charge and commands respect, and we are his faithful servants. Or, God is the one who takes care of me if I'm obedient, and I am his. In the next stage, that's not really developed in the Bible, because the Bible is really focused on that blue stage, is orange. It's the modernistic, logical meme that kind of was birthed during the Enlightenment, way after the Bible was written. The orange meme might say, God is principle and law. That sounds like unity, doesn't it? And I can harness God to create an enjoyable, prosperous life. That's where the unity movement came out of, the orange, logical, modernistic meme. And then the next meme is the green meme. It's the progressive meme. It's the inclusive, love diversity, kind of what a lot of us are into, interfaith experiences and all kinds of eclectic ideas. We might say, God is an energetic, beloved, benevolent presence, and we are instruments of God's love. The next stage is a big leap into integral consciousness. The originator of this called it the momentous leap of consciousness. And we might say at that point that God is the mastermind and the master artist behind all ideas, and I am the essence of God, therefore I am God. I'll end with this for you to think about. When we say that beginning statement that we do every week, which is a quote from Charles Fillmore, there is only one presence and power active in the universe and in my life, God the good omnipotence. I've changed it. But don't tell anybody. No, I'm telling you because I think it just gives me goosebumps when I say it. Because I want to know that I am the very essence of God. I want to remind myself of that the very sparkle, radiance, and power of God is mine. If I decide to wake up to it, it's there, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's everyone's, even if they're not awake. So I want to own that. And I say, there is only one presence and power in the universe and in my life, God the good I am. Whoa, that just gives me goosebumps every time I say it. So I invite you to consider that too, as you are evolving. And I don't know about that omnipotence word, because what people always argue is, if God is omnipotent, then why doesn't God stop all the suffering? There's another whole talk, right? So if I can say God, the good I am, then I'm owning my oneness with that presence and power. And that's the consciousness I'm striving to maintain all the time, practicing that presence. So as I close down, this has really been intellectual and busy, but I just want to bless you and just give us a chance to breathe in and out just for a moment. And speak a word of gratitude for enlightenment, for awakening, for seeing the world through integral eyes, to be able to love all the stages we've been through, to embrace those values, and to love others who are not where we are, but we know they're right where they need to be in their spiritual journey. And we are grateful for that awareness, and so it is. Namaste.